Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a huge book haul of all of the books that I have purchased so far in 2021. So this is a long haul, and that is because I haven't done one yet this year and I've been buying quite a few books. Also, my birthday passed, so quite a few of these are presents as well. But without further ado, let's just get into it. I've separated them into kind of categories so to see if it'll make it flow a bit better, so let's just get started. So I figured I'd start with the nonfiction actually that I've purchased recently. A few of these have been on my radar for a while, and one of them I've actually read already. I just wanted to get the actual physical copy, but the first one I actually found on TikTok. One of my favorite creators, Mythical Rose, was talking about it, and that is Anne Boleyn, 500 Years of Lies by Hayley Nolan. She actually has her own TikTok account as well where she talks about Anne Boleyn. And I don't know, I'm excited to read it. I started reading it a few weeks ago and it wasn't the right time for nonfiction, so I put it down for the time being. But I am excited to read about this. This is a very different version of a historical book. I can tell already that it's very romanticized, and it's also very, what's the word for it? Like, it's got a lot of shock value. It's got a lot of like, it reads like a documentary almost. So it'll be an interesting read and I'm excited to actually get to it. Next up, I already read this book back in January, but I wanted to get a physical copy because I listened to the audiobook, and that is HUUUUGE Feminism by Mikki, Kendall. I love this book. This was a great take on intersectional feminism specifically, and talking about why your feminism needs to be intersectional for it to be effective, and focused on, like the note here says, notes from the women that a movement forgot, talking about specifically women who are plus size, women who are disabled, women who aren't white. And I think that's a very important point to make, that these women did not get the right amount of space and like airtime as the white feminists did, and white feminism itself is quite harmful. So this was a great read. Anybody who identifies as a feminist, I think, should read it. Next up, this is a book that I heard about during my master's and I've always wanted to read. I'm trying to get more into disability studies and to learn more about it, so I ended up picking up Disability Visibility, First Person Stories from the 21st Century, edited by Alice Wong. This is a selection of essays all about disability in the 21st century. So again, I'm excited to read this and learn a bit more because I don't know enough about disability studies and I definitely need to expand my repertoire. Finally, the last nonfiction book that I picked up because I saw it on Kayla's channel at Books and Lala, and that is Bad Feminist by Roxanne Gay. This again is a set of essays all about feminism. Again, this is a combination of essays and as well as memoir, and again, I'm very excited to read this. I've heard very good reviews, and again, I can't read enough about feminism, I don't think, so I'm excited to get to this. Next up, I've got 3 more stacks here, and I think the one on the right here is the smallest, so we'll go for that one next. This one I've kind of designated as my contemporary kind of shelf, but it's also got a couple historical fictions in here, so let's start with that. The first one here was a birthday present from my parents, and I'm very grateful for, and that is The Witches of New York by Amy McKay. This one I put on my list back when I was getting ready for applying for my PhD. This was one of the books I wanted to study. Since then I found out I'm not doing my PhD this year, so it'll still be a fun read. This tells the story of a few witches living in New York City back in the 1920s, one of which owns a apothecary kind of thing where she sells her potions and everything specifically to women. This is a feminist, a queer, and a historical book that I'm very excited to read. Next up, this again was another present from my parents for my birthday, so again, thank you very much, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. You've probably seen this one on many people's shelves. This is part of Reese's book club. It is a bestseller. It is on so many different book lists, and it's one that I'm very excited to read. It is kind of like a coming-of-age story, but also a murder mystery set in like the swamps of North Carolina. It starts off in 1969, and it follows this girl as she grows up in this very isolated area, and also has a murder mystery, which is always fun. So again, I'm very excited to read this. Next up is definitely historical. It is a retelling of the Iliad, and that is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. This tells the story of all of the women, goddesses and mortals alike, involved in the Trojan War, from the goddesses that started it and the women who are typically blamed for it. I'm very excited to read this. I just read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which is another Iliad retelling from the point of view of Briseis, so I'm excited to see all the other faces that are not represented enough when talking about the Trojan War. I'm pumped. I got this at Costco. I was very excited. And again, this is definitely up on my list very soon for a book I need to read. Next up is another book that I've already read, and that is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. I picked this up for a book club, actually. This was for my friend Alina on TikTok. Her channel is called Herstory. It is her monthly book club. This was her pick for February, and it was fantastic. This follows two sisters who are twins who grew up in this town that was created by and for specifically light-skinned mixed race people back in the southern United States in the early 50s, 60s. This follows two sisters who are twins who end up running away at the age of 16. One of them moves on to marrying a very dark-skinned man and having a child and moving back to Mallard, their hometown, for the rest of her life. Whereas the other one ends up moving to New Orleans and passing as a white woman for the rest of her life. This is a generational story that deals with trauma, it deals with identity, it deals with sibling relationships, family, what it means to be part of a family, and it deals with the consequences of their actions across their entire lives. It deals with their children as well and how they meet, and it's an incredible story. I really, really enjoyed it. Everybody, I think, should read it. Next up, this book I've seen a lot on BookTube. Specifically, I saw the recommendation from Emma over at Emma Books, and that is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a young adult thriller and also young adult contemporary novel that deals with a young woman named Enchanted who ends up getting taken advantage of by people in the music industry, producers in the music industry, and deals a lot with that type of trauma and that type of behavior, which was very common during the 90s. And it also is a murder mystery, which is also super fun. But I've heard this book is incredible, and I'm very excited to read it as well. Finally, the last one in this section of books is The Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lo. This is a historical fiction contemporary novel set during the 1950s. During the Red Scare, set in Chinatown in San Francisco. This follows two young girls, one of which is Chinese American, and it follows her as she simultaneously has to deal with the racism and sexism that comes with living in the 1950s in San Francisco as a non-white person, but it also deals with her growing sexuality and falling in love with another girl, which is very interesting and something I'm very excited to read. This one is very, very high on my want to read list. Okay, next section is going to be fantasy/sci-fi novels. Yeah, let's just get into it. Next up is another book that I got from my parents, which I'm very grateful for, and that is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1926 Shanghai and follows Roma and Juliet, yes, who are children of the leaders of two rival gangs. I love Shakespeare and I love Shakespeare retellings, so I'm very excited to see this one, and I've heard very good things. Next up is the final book that I got for my parents for my birthday, and that is A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kimmerer. This is the third and final book in the Curse So Dark and Lonely trilogy, which is a urban fantasy retelling of Beauty and the Beast, which I love retellings, like I just said, so I'm very excited to get into this one. I have the other two books, but I haven't started it yet, so now I'm excited to have the full trilogy. The next two books are actually gifts from my friend Kayla over at I Love Books Okay, so I will leave her channel and her Twitter down below. Thank you so much, Kayla. I'm so excited to read these. The first one is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This is a adult fantasy series following a bunch of different characters. The archipelago of Dara was once divided into 7 kingdoms with shifting alliances and constant battles, the tempest of diverse dialects and cultures. When a relentless king united with 7 lands into one empire, some thought it would bring peace and end the turmoil. Instead, it brought stagnation and suffering, the anger of the gods, and finally a rebellion. I love rebel stories. I love found family, like rebel group stories, and it's adult fantasy, and I'm very excited about it. I absolutely can't wait to start it. And the next one is Gideon the Ninth by Tamzyn Muir, which is lesbian necromancers in space. That is all I know about it, and that's all I need to know about it, because that is perfection, and I cannot wait to read it. Next up, I got a completed duology, which is Wicked Fox and Vicious Spirits by Kat Cho. These are 2 fantasy books that are inspired by like a K-drama and Korean folklore, which I'm pumped about. Both of these, again, I got on recommendation from Kayla, so I am excited to give this series a go. Next up, no one is surprised, I picked up A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th book, fifth book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is the first in a selection of spin-offs about the main trilogy, and following Feyre's sister Nesta and Rhys's friend slash brother Cassian. I'm so excited to read this. I'm trying to wait until I can read it with my cousin Colleen, but I'm like really resisting the urge to read it right now. This is a honker. It's like 700 pages, which is unsurprising for anybody who's read Sarah J. Maas. I love the Court of Thorns and Roses series so much. I love it more than Throne of Glass, so to have another book in the series is very exciting for me, and I cannot wait to read it because I love Nesta and I love Cassian. I've heard some like mixed reviews of this, which is on par with Sarah J. Maas, but I am a forever Sarah J. Maas fan, so I absolutely cannot wait to read this finally. Finally, the last book in this little selection of books is We Free the Stars by Hafsah Faizel. This is the sequel to We Hunt the Flame, which is a ancient Arabian inspired fantasy duology. This was the final book. It was perfect. I read it back in January and I can't get enough of it. You need to read this series. If you love found families, if you love slow burn, I'm supposed to kill you kind of romance, if you love enemies to lovers, and if you love massive amounts of world building and a really complex magic system, you will adore this series, and I think everybody needs to read it. Finally, I have some adult romances that I want to show you guys that I picked up over the last little while because I'm on a romance kick, apparently, this spring. First, I picked up one of my most anticipated books of this year, and that was Actor Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I've already read this. It was perfect. It was fantastic. I am obsessed with this series. The entire trilogy is amazing. This is the third book in the Brown Sisters companion series, and this one follows Eve Brown, who is the youngest and most different of the Brown sisters, I guess I should say. Eve is always trying to find something new to spend her life on, but she often gets bored and often wants to change career paths. But her parents have finally decided to sit her down and cut her off from her trust fund and basically tell her she needs to go get a job and get some responsibility. And as she's trying to mull over that, she ends up stumbling into a job interview for a head chef position at this little B&B in a small town near her hometown, who is run by Jacob, who is a autistic man who is just a very big perfectionist and absolutely hates it when anything to do with his B&B is not going right. He just lost his perfect chef right before he enters into a huge cooking competition kind of thing, cooking fair, which is supposed to be happening in a month after this event. Eve and Jacob do not get along right away, and the two of them end up on a enemies to lovers journey after Eve ends up hitting Jacob with her car. I love this book so much. It was incredible. The two main characters were so interesting and just so different and nothing like I've ever read before, and I really enjoyed it. It was a fantastic read. You should read all of the Brown Sisters books because they're fantastic. Next up, I picked up Much Ado About You by Samantha Young, which is a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare, and it is set on the countryside of England. This follows Evie, who is unsatisfied with her life at the present moment after she gets passed up for a job promotion and decides to quit her job and go on a holiday to England, where she ends up living above a bookstore and ends up running the bookstore for the entirety of her holiday. It's part of the package. Think of The Holiday, the Christmas movie. That's kind of the same idea. While Evie's there to do some soul searching, she runs into, what's his name? Roan, who is a local farmer and a lifelong resident of this tiny sleepy little town, and the two of them don't get along right away, or at least she does not get along with him right away, and it just follows them on her holiday. And it was okay. I read it and I liked it, but I was bored. I don't know how I read it so fast or how I finished it at all, because I was very bored throughout the entire thing. To me, this felt like somebody was writing about England without ever having visited England before in their life, so that was really interesting. I hated it. There were too many Shakespeare references, which I never thought I'd say, and it just overall wasn't my favorite. So I ended up giving it like a 3 out of 5 stars. But if you like the premise, you may enjoy this book. Next up, I picked up Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This tells the story of Grace, who is a newly graduated PhD student who has just completed her PhD in astronomy. And to celebrate, she ends up going on a girls' trip, weekend trip with two of her best friends to Vegas. She ends up getting drunk and getting married to a girl she has no idea who she even is. Her name is Yuki. And when she gets home from her vacation, she decides on a whim to spend the weekend in New York, or spend the summer in New York City with her new wife to get to know her and herself. She's very dissatisfied with the way that her career seems to be going and is very frustrated with her own life and decides to do some soul searching. This book really hit me at the end. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. And everybody should read it. It's fantastic. Next up, I picked up Well Played by Jen Deluca. This is the sequel to Well Met, which is a adult romance companion series, kind of like the Brown Sisters series, set at a Renaissance fair in Maryland. I absolutely adored this. This followed Stacy, who is a friend of the main character, and this follows Stacy as she enters into a kind of whirlwind year-long online relationship with the lead singer of the band that tends to show up to their run fair every summer, or so she thinks. This book was great. I loved it. There was a few tropes that were kind of annoying, but overall the setting and the characters just make up for it entirely. I just love being in the world of these books, and I can't wait for the third book, Well Matched, to come out in October, much too far away. And finally, the last books that I picked up, which these are actually presents from my co-workers at work. They got me a gift card to Indigo, so I ended up purchasing the entire series, and that is the Reluctant Royals series by Alyssa Cole. This is made up of A Princess in Theory, A Duke by Default, A Prince on Paper, which I'm currently reading, Once Ghosted, Twice Shy, the first novella, and Can't Escape Love, the second novella. This is a completed series, all following many different characters set in around New York City, and follows them as they as they interact with and become part of different royalty, basically. They're super fun, they're super lighthearted. I read the first 4. I read all of these except for A Prince on Paper during a 24-hour readathon I was doing. This was during the 3rd round of readathon hosted by J.D. Ray Reads back last weekend. I've got a vlog for it, so I'll leave a link up below. These books are fantastic. I absolutely adore them. A Duke by Default is definitely my favorite so far. I haven't finished A Prince on Paper, but whatever. I picked these up on recommendation from Zoe over at Zoe's Alt Booked, so I'll leave her channel down below. She raves about this series, and for good reason. They were fantastic. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up because it really helps support my channel. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of the books on my list, or if you have any other recommendations for me based on these books on my list. And if you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish, organizing, and writing videos every week, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.